Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast. This is episode 235 with repeat guest Tim Pottoroff, also known as Ergo Tim. In episode 113, we sat down and kind of talked about a introduction to why that we want to do these ergo assessments out there. I heard a lot of great things from Tim here recently about a lot of how people end up with pain, and from pain, of course, they try to manage it themselves, sometimes the right way, sometimes the wrong way. Doctors also probably at times are not prescribing the right thing or watching their patients enough. But I really wanted Tim to share with the audience a lot of the things that he's seen out there in the industry. Um, Tim, let's go ahead there and get started. But before that we get started, can you tell folks a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your company? And I love to see the pictures of your dog all the time too. And that is really, really great.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, like I said, Tim Pottoroff, the Ergo Tim, if you will. And I've been an ergonomist for a long time. This month marks 33 years as in the profession. And I mean, I started out, as a manufacturing engineer and just was always fascinated with how things were made and how people made them. And sort of progressed from working in primary metals at aluminum founder smelter to being a consulting ergonomist for the last 29 years. And I think the fascinating piece is, I get to see, I've been in mines 900 feet below the surface. I've been processing platforms 13 stories above the surface, all over the world. And a couple of things is that and I'm getting ready to do a talk next month for the some ergonomics students at Northern Illinois University, and is that ergonomics knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter where you are in the world; the principles remain the same. Um, if the reach is too much or the position's too high or too low, over time, person can exhibit problems, can develop problems, and I think that we sort of got on this subject of MSDs or musculoskeletal disorders and opioids because I'm giving a talk early next month at the Region 2 ASSP PDC in Las Vegas. And I've given this talk, I've had this talk for a couple of years. It keeps evolving because things keep changing in the world of ergonomics as they relate to MSDs and opioids. So
Thank you. Thank
I
you,
don't know if
Tim.
you, yeah.
Um, and for me, I hope that I don't ask a lot of basic type questions.
Mhm.
The only real pain that I've had with MSDs, I mean, most of my stuff is office things, of course, and all
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
as a young man, I hung a lot of drywall on the ceiling. That was
Mhm.
really hard on my
Yeah.
shoulders. I
Yep.
can
Yep.
think about when I was a roofer and I'd have to carry the tar paper and carry that, and we would go up and down the
Mhm.
ladders, and that
Right.
that was real hard work and all
And
that.
and
Hmm.
ironically, David, construction is one of the top industries for opioid issues, and a lot of times it comes from shoulder injuries or soft tissue, rotator
Oh yeah.
cuff. Those are one of the primary drivers in industry, if you will, of opioid addiction. And on average, about 100,000 people a year die from some sort of opioid overdose. And if we want to put that into context, um, what, a few weeks ago, we lost 68 people, I think, in that crash at DCA.
Hmm.
Their plane was coming from the home airport I used. I grew up near Wichita. Um, but if we put the opioid epidemic into perspective, 100,000 deaths, that is roughly one jumbo jet of about over 200 people crashing with no survivors every day of the year. If we
Yeah.
look at it really, really into perspective. And that we would say you see the outcry and the over just one small regional jet. This is a jumbo jet going down every single day of the year. So about 70% of those deaths are related to fentanyl.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons we're seeing such a focus on the current administration, but with Canada, Mexico, and China, because a lot of it's coming from China via Canada and Mexico. And a lot of the discussion you're hearing, um, I mean, it's not a political issue. It's a life and death issue. Is over the amount of fentanyl coming in through the border, the north border and the south border, and where it's coming from. And so that's the rub. 70,000 people just from fentanyl, about 70% of fentanyl. That's crazy.
That is a lot of people. And
Hmm.
I'm sure that some, when they have the accidental death, it's
Hmm.
kind of outside the norms and outside the window. Others
Hmm.
are probably, they start off with, wow, this really feels good.
Hmm.
And then at some point it kind of grows to
Oh
addiction
yeah.
and just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
Yeah.
spirals.
If we back up to that injury, um, so what happens in some Medicare and federal reimbursement rates, doctors and medical groups are rewarded financially for achieving low pain or good pain management scores, i.e.,
Mhm.
we don't want pain. So they are incentivized financially, have been, and started that's starting to be addressed. It's starting to be improved. They've been incentivized to overprescribe the opioids, which are then causing people to get hooked, and then they're causing. And what happens with the opioids is after they say, okay, prescription no more, you can't have any more prescription opioids. They turn to street drugs, and heroin, frankly, is, from my understanding, is more easily accessible to somebody who needs to have relief from pain than a prescription opioid.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the people turn to street drugs basically because they're more readily accessible. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's what they call it, unintended consequences. A lot of stuff going on here that is causing a lot of challenges. You also see major lawsuits and settlements with various pharmaceutical companies, pharmaceutical distributors. There's one client I've worked with once, a distributor. They pay into big settlement. There's a company called Purdue Pharma. I don't believe it's related to the chicken people, but it just sounds similar. But the family that owns it has been trying to set things up so that in the settlement that they are absolved from any liability, um, or for pushing too many of these opioids towards people in affected areas. And generally, it's the people affected are mainly in Appalachia,
Mhm.
um, Southeast Kansas, very rural areas, very much areas that have been left behind economically, frankly.
Mhm. Right, 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 right. So, and I also heard they're incredibly cheap too. So anytime that something is cheap, it's probably is going to be a whole lot
Hmm.
easier to go to. And I was
Hmm.
listening to another podcast where they've kind of sat down and broke down the whole how drugs used to be really scary because you'd have to put a needle in
Hmm.
inside of you and everything else.
Hmm.
But now that barrier with the pill, of course,
Just
is
pop a
a
pill.
whole lot lower. People are not very scared if you're going to consciously make that effort of I'm going to put this needle in and I'm going to inject this. A whole
Hmm.
different level, of course, out there.
Yeah, I have a good friend, professional, retired not too long, a couple years ago, but he had been working out on a treadmill on a business trip, slipped down, fell, and wrenched his back. And he told me one time, he said, those painkillers felt really good. He said, but I was in a fog all the time. He
Mm.
said, I just had to cut back. And another fellow I know, a police officer, had a major shoulder injury. Again, gee, shoulder injury. Um, and I was talking to him recently, and he said, yeah, I mean, he said he had to learn to see what was a right amount of painkiller versus too much or too little. Because, again, he's
Ah.
being very cognizant of, because, one size does not fit all. So we metabolize things differently, we respond differently. Um, so, I mean, when I go to the dentist, they have, depending what anesthetic they're using, if they need to do some work, they have to give me an extra shot or two, because everybody responds differently.
That
So we need
is
to
a
look.
that is a really good point. We always think about a pill, we'll just do it. But of course, depending upon how you like metabolize it, your body weight,
Hmm.
all the other factors out there, that one pill could be really awful for me, and one pill wouldn't do anything for you. And it's the
Yes,
exact same dose, of course, too, at the same
exactly.
time.
Yeah. So,
Wow. Well, because that's something that a doctor probably doesn't have that data. It doesn't matter if the doctor's really trying to do the right thing, really
mhm.
trying to, until that you get on it, and then you have to say what works, what doesn't work, was it too much, too
Hmm.
little, all that stuff. Um, and I have heard that some people are not always honest with their doctors too, of all things.
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they
So
want some good, they want the good stuff, if you will.
right. So if people are going to lie about weight and other issues and all that, well, then they may say, well, maybe it wasn't strong enough.
Hmm.
Just because they literally want it stronger too. It may not
Hmm.
be that they're even hooked. They just want it stronger
Mm.
also.
I had a procedure done several years ago as a two-step thing. After the first one, they just sent me home, and oh my gosh, yeah, I was in pain. And finally, the second time, I said, you got to do something because this was not a good experience." And so they prescribed me something, Vicodin or something like that, and I
Mhm.
just would break it in half because you know what it was, and right as the pandemic was rolling out, I experienced a bilateral hernia,
Mhm.
and um after the surgery, being cognizant of what's going on, I was like, I was sort of scared to do too much, but I learned that first day in, I didn't stay ahead of the pain, so I learned the hard way. So it's a balance of how do we respond? We don't want to overdo it, we don't want to underdo it either if we're prescribed. So it's a
Right.
fine balancing act.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard, and it's really hard when people that you love are going through it too, because
Hmm.
you hear the stories about how people, hey, my back hurt. I just took a couple of pills, and the next thing so it's always really hard when someone says, "Oh, I just had a minor surgery. They gave me Oh, I forgot what. Yeah, they gave me some oxy, and that was awesome, and that was great,
Hmm.
and all that kind of stuff. Then, um, I always kind of wonder how many people are having elective surgery and then also end up hooked,
Hmm.
whereas opposed you're having surgery because you literally have to
Yeah.
have it, of course, too, at the same
Yeah,
time.
I don't know on that what that number is, but that's a good question. I was working with a emergency services provider last spring, and I did a couple work visits with them. And I remember one of the calls was the ambulance crews. One of the calls we went on, one of the first calls first day was for a gentleman retirement age who had chronic pain or discomfort, and he took a painkiller and he forgotten he'd taken painkiller. He took another and was afraid he
Oh,
had overdosed.
oh
And
man.
his wife wasn't around, so he did the right thing. He called 911, and then he took Narcan.
Hmm.
And Narcan is a helps to counteract the effects if a person has an overdose. But the challenge was that he didn't realize Narcan does not act instantaneously. It takes a little bit of time um, you know, to take effect. And so he panicked. He called 911, and they ended up transporting him just for observation. But again, people need to know too, what's if I have the antidote, if you will, people need to understand what the response and reaction time will be. And again, like I said, results will vary.
Right. So not quite the same thing, but so
Mhm.
my stepdad is going through a little like dementia. Well, I shouldn't say a little. It's not going to get better, of course, But
Mhm.
so now my mom has to give out his pills because she's
Mhm.
worried that he'll just take some, forget he
Yep.
took some, of course, and just kind of keep on going and going. So
Hmm.
so at some point we also have to look at the people around us and and kind of help and step into and all that. And that can be really uncomfortable. Obviously,
Mhm.
it's really, I shouldn't say easy. It's easier with your family as opposed to somebody you see at work, kind of like,
Mhm.
that guy kind of sounds as if he's slurring his words some, you
Mhm.
know. And there's a lot of folks out there, especially in the construction field, that they're just
Mhm.
not going to miss a day of work.
Yep.
Back when I was young and stupid and all that kind of stuff, it did not matter how sick I was. It didn't
Yeah.
matter anything because you just don't miss work. You
Mhm.
have to go to work. You have a lot of pride in providing for your family, all that stuff too.
Yep.
I mean.
Some of us don't like what went into our careers. Um, I'll suck it up and I'll do it. That's but that I grew up farming and
Mhm.
ranching,
Yeah,
and you had to be laid out horizontal, puking your guts out not to have to go help. I mean, that was just you just didn't do
right.
it. And that's you bring up construction, but also farming
Yes.
is also an industry with high potential for opioid abuse and addiction because I believe you have a lot of people working by themselves. They don't have that support structure necessarily. There's not as much of a support structure. You're out working on the farm all day. You talk to your animals. I mean, the funny story. We always have dogs growing up,
Mhm.
and during the winter months, my dad would he'd drive his bus route and he'd come home, feed the cattle, and he would there'd always be dog hair in the cab of the inside of the cab of the pickup. When
Mhm.
we were with him, he would never let the dog inside. Oh, but we knew that he was letting the dogs in and ride with him while he was by himself.
Oh,
Oh
oh
no, that's
yes.
not dog hair. That's not dog hair. Yes, Dad, it is. We played
Yeah.
along with.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
He liked
yeah.
that company. People, that you don't have that company. And now I understand why, after a lot of years after finishing his bus route, he'd go and have coffee with several of the other bus drivers for a little bit, and he'd come home, do chores and everything, whatever he needed to do, and come back.
Right.
That camaraderie, that support structure, that
Mhm.
network.
So, with opioids, do you find I shouldn't say you because I'm sure that yours is going to be like research based only, but is there other ones that are easy to find but pretty cheap? I know we talked about how oxy and fentanyl and heroin. Are there other
Mhm.
things out there? Because I just don't know that stuff enough to even probably even ask that right question to you.
Yeah, I'm not a pharmacologist. Um,
Hmm.
So I really haven't looked into that deeply. But I think what happens is when people cannot get their prescription drugs, they go to a street drug.
Right.
That's where you're seeing the fentanyl. That's where you're seeing the heroin abuse, and those are some scary things going on.
Right. I have
Um,
to assume at some point when a person is starting out that they're able to work still, and then at some point because they're addicted or they're just having
mhm.
trouble making it to work, that now they don't have a job. So maybe
Yeah,
that leads to other things like there's going to be some crime involved too. There's going to be lying to family and selling off possessions,
yeah, losing. Basically, a lot of folks a lot of people lose everything if they don't have intervention early on. Lose their families, lose their jobs. They just hit rock bottom. And the challenge is do they have the support structure somewhere somehow to help them climb back, climb back up to a level of self-sufficiency.
right.
That's the
It's
challenge. And the thing is, what I try to preach and talk to folks is in the world of work, a lot of the conditions that causes injuries can be prevented if we start from the outset of designing things for what we call
Mhm.
prevention through designing things well.
Mhm.
And that's where how to say it bugs me. Rarely do I get to be involved in the ground floor of a project.
Right. Yep.
So, and that's where we really have. have the best opportunity to reduce some of the risks, design out, avoid in the first place some of the situations that cause issues.
Right, right, right.
And
Um, so what I'm doing right now is that we're at a point at a couple places. I'm working and covering that we're gutting parts of it. We're upgrading, we're putting things in. So we're really trying to do things right the first time then.
mhm.
But many times the safety professionals kind of thrust into a job and you're kind of stuck with what you're stuck with, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if
Oh gee, we're going to install this new line, and pieces, parts, and equipment start arriving next week. Why don't you do a safety review? Like what? Well,
right, exactly.
um, yeah, sure, right. And when they sometimes when they do a safety reviews, they'll have documented. Let's say, are there any ergonomics issues? Well, no, nobody's going to say yes. And that's a nebulous question in the first place is how are people interacting with the process? How are people interacting with materials? We have to ask those sorts of questions. What is going on and the points of the operation where a person is interacting with it?
Right, 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 right. Well, and I've often thought I don't have any real proof, of course, out there. But if you look at a person who maybe is a little more fit, maybe their body is a little more like resistant, as opposed to a person who's doing everything they can to not work out, to not walk much, and to do
Yeah.
that,
I mean, yeah.
you know,
The
um,
level, person's level of fitness is going to make a difference, blood circulation, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but um, but again, that's not going to be a panacea. That's not a
Oh,
magic.
oh,
Not a
right, right,
magic.
right. Yeah, that's just one of those contributing factors, to it then. Right,
Yeah.
right. So in an ideal world, if you could sit down and say, all right, we're going to look at everything first, then we're going to talk about buying it. We're going to
Mhm.
design
Yeah.
everything first, the whole
Yeah.
line where the power of the gas, all that is coming from. Then we're going to
Yeah.
worry about buying stuff. You would really
Mhm.
do a much, much, much better job,
Oh
out
yeah.
there
I
then.
have a client I worked with a few years ago. They just installed a $250,000 filling line for whatever liquid product they were going to put into gallon containers. But they had a supply line, about 6 inch diameter supply line, located 13 inches above the floor. Okay, fine. But you had to cross over that line anytime you wanted to go work in the process where you load materials or punch, can work on the control system and da 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 da. It's like, what are they thinking? And
That sounds like somebody forgot to put that line there. And
yeah,
then everything came in. Somebody said, "Hey, the discharge has to go someplace." I
yeah,
mean, not discharge, but
supply,
after it's filled, of course. You're right. So,
the supply line. Yeah, it was like what? Um, and then there are a few other things, and well, it's just that those are the things that happen. I was in one facility, gosh, and I was doing an assessment and a brand new line, and it was and then the design engineer was from another continent. We'll just say that, and in this person in his culture, new is good.
oh, okay, right.
New is good. And so I was explaining, it's like, oh, gee, every time a person has to put a new assembly pallet, about 12 inches square, 12 by 12 up here, above shoulders. I mean, that's going to be an issue with the shoulders. Well, no, 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 it's new, it's good, it's good.
Right, exactly.
Because it was new, it was good, but that from a design standpoint, no, not necessarily. But from a
Right,
cultural standpoint,
right,
so
right,
and so we got to sometimes deal with culture too.
right. Have you found a couple of the different orgs are looking at putting in these ergo standards and then kind of almost like all right, so like members, here's a gosh, I hate to call it a draft. Here's a sample of the ergonomic. Here's a sample line. Here's a sample how we sat down and made this thing right the first time.
hmm Yeah, I mean, when I do courses and workshops for engineers and designers, I talk to them about anthropometrics, i.e., the dimensions of the human body and how it relates to design tools and equipment and jobs within, that accommodate a wide range of people. And I think that's one of the things is a lot of designers don't know what they don't know. They're really good technical professionals.
Right.
They're not designing stuff on purpose that would hurt somebody else. They just don't, again, they don't know what they don't know. And
Right,
so
right,
I'm giving a workshop out west in a few weeks. And those are the fun ones because I get to go and my background's engineering and I tell people I'm an engineer, I drive trains. But not really. Be fun though.
right,
But it's getting that's where the I feel we have the best impact, where I have the best impact, was where I work with engineers and designers and helping them avoid making future mistakes.
right, 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 right. Have you heard of anybody putting these different types of principles into a college course?
Oh yeah.
To kind of almost catch that. And I don't mean somebody who's studying like ergonomics. Let's just say the mechanical engineer,
No.
a chemical engineer, somebody like that who's going to sit down and build that refinery, build that
Hmm.
line
Yeah.
that's gonna fill a sugar cube, a sugar
Whatever.
pound. Right, right, right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, sugar refinery. They're sugar.
Mhm.
They're actually called refineries.
Oh, okay. Okay, are they?
Yeah, yeah. They're sticky. But man, that's a sticky subject though. But so my younger my how do I say this? Let me go through my litany of my siblings. One of my brothers, electrical engineer, computer engineer. My sister and her husband are mechanical engineers, although she has a dual major bakery science and mechanical engineering. Um, I've got my background's industrial engineering. I got nephews, and one nephew is a civil engineer, and my younger son is studying mechanical engineering at Notre Dame. And one of the things I told him is if you get the opportunity to take a human factors or ergonomics class, because the MEs don't take it. Because when you get an elective in engineering school, are you going to take another engineering course, or are you going to take something quote unquote easy in another discipline?
Right, 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 right. Well,
That's
and it gives him that totally separate perspective because he's going to have to sit down in the future. They're designing something, you know,
hmm
it would be really good if he sat down and said, and I did this on purpose so that
hmm
we reduce these factors,
Yeah.
as opposed to I did it because it was easy. I didn't know about
Mhm.
factors or safety
Yeah.
or ergonomics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When I
so,
give the workshops, course participants get a binder with stuff I've put together, with materials I put together and resources, and here's how to go, here's where to look. But also, while while it's in while it's available, a handbook, basically an ergonomics handbook that's published.
mhm.
And I think for graduation, I'll give that one of those copy of one of those to him just in case.
That's right, exactly. Yeah,
But
exactly,
and that'll give him a
exactly.
leg up down the road if it's trusting he applies it. And he's one of the kinds of people who always wants to. He never like sometimes he um, is paralyzed because he doesn't want to make a mistake. But this will give him hopefully more confidence to say, "Hey, I'm doing everything. I'm looking at everything that and doing the best I can." Because that's one of the things that sometimes challenges engineers is there becomes paralysis. Uh,
Oh, yes.
gee, I don't making the decision because they don't want to make a mistake. Well, here's another tool to help you make a better decision.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah. I talk to a lot of engineers and I say, look, I get it. You guys are super smart. You're talented. You really want to do the right thing, but there's no such thing as a perfect plan out there. I've
mhm,
never sat down, come up with the perfect plan, executed it, and
mhm,
every single thing went 100% according to
yeah,
plan. There's
yep,
always something, and so it's good to have a plan, but it's also good to be flexible because as things change, then
mhm,
you change with that plan, of course,
yeah,
too at
yeah.
the same time.
And it's nice the having the plan, but also the knowledge and knowing the practicality and relevance.
Hmm.
I have been giving a workshops, gosh, since the mid 90s.
Hmm.
And I was in the early 2000s. I was doing a trip to Asia, gave a workshop to this client facility in South Korea, and the coworker that I was traveling with at the time was back there just a couple of years ago, and they still have the course materials from that workshop in
Oh,
the
very cool.
2000s.
Yeah.
And I've heard from the workshops I'm giving today that one person is the company that made the filling line and sort of awkward. I did training for them, and one of their employees left. I went to another company. Well, somebody, a good buddy who works for that new company says, yeah, I was visiting this facility and this engineer started showing me his ergonomics training materials. And I said, wait a minute, that's your company.
Very good. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's
when people take stuff with them, when they hang on to it as a reference, it's valuable. I think that's the thing is, giving people the knowledge, especially designers, the knowledge and empowerment to fix things. The other challenge I see with prevention through design engineers is there's a desire to fix 100% of the problem,
oh yeah, yes, yes.
and sometimes we can't. We just can't. So I try to give them permission. If you can solve 10%, 5%, 15%, you're still better than if you're at nothing.
Right. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, exactly.
Do what you can do.
Yeah.
It's like the
Tim,
wise. Good.
Tim, it looks like we are bumping up on time. Could
All
you
right.
take a couple seconds? We'll kind of do a wrap up. I didn't know that it was 100,000 people a year. I just now at my over at my firehouse there for my county, they'll kind of post up a couple things like, "Hey, we saved
Hmm.
this many people," or "We lost this many." But I never really kind of
Hmm.
sat down in totality and kind of thought, "Gosh, I'm only one county of." Who knows how many
Thousands.
counties are really out there? But wow,
Thousands.
100,000, that is incredible, the amount of folks that are dying from this. So,
And that's just in
um,
this country.
oh, that's right. That's right. Exactly. So, um, maybe we'll do a part two and look at how other countries, not how they're tackling it, because that's really hard, but just kind of when you look at like a percentage of population, too out
Hmm.
there. So 100,000 is pretty big. We actually don't have that big of a population in this country, so that's
Yeah.
that's really a lot of folks
The
out
thing
there.
is it's onesie, it's individuals. It's not like it's a mass casualty event, and
Right.
that's why it doesn't get quite the attention.
Right, right, right. But that also means that it's probably touched every family in some way, shape,
Hmm.
or form then out there,
Yeah.
So,
And when I give a talk, I'll ask. So I'll just ask, raise a hand. Are you aware of anybody you know of? And large majorities of people will raise their hands if they're aware of it. Some people still are not comfortable
oh
talking
yeah,
about it.
right, 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 right. Um, and of course, that's always a really really difficult subject for some because some people don't want to be seen as, oh, that's part of my family, part of my friend group, all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So,
And that's
Tim,
and go
let's
ahead.
take a couple seconds. We're just about done. Could you let folks know how to find you out there to get more info on this whole thing?
If you want to reach out to me by email, info at qp3ergosystems.com, just like it sounds. Phone is 847-921-3113. And just look for the Ergo Tim on LinkedIn.
Hmm. Thank you, Tam. Yeah. I
Thank you.
really like those different photos with Spencer on there too.
Yeah,
So
the Ergo Lab. He's my right hand advisor. He's off trying to scam some early dinner. But
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Tim. This
thank
was
you.
episode 235 with Tim Pottoroff, Ergo Tim. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and have a safe day.